So yeah, like Antoinette said, she did like a great introduction, but we will be going over some political advocacy and policy resources. So yeah. So just to give like a brief table of content so you guys aren't just like left in the dark on like what we'll be talking about. So first we're going to be going over introductions of Shane and I. Then we will be talking about how to research government officials and like how to understand them and sort of like how to approach elections and things like that. Then Shane will take it away and teach us how to do Leginfo and some other tools on how to like research bills and things like that. And then lastly, we'll like leave room for questions at the end. We do have like space for questions throughout the presentation, but if you wanted to like go ahead and wait till the end to say them, or if like something comes up, you'll have that time at the end. All right. So just a little bit about me. Antoinette already did like a great job, but so I'm a second year undergraduate UCLA student. Like she said, I'm enrolled in a course about community engagement and social change. I am a public affairs and gender studies double major. I'm very passionate about like sexual and reproductive health, and especially like how that intersects with like mass incarceration. I think it's very interesting. And then obviously like I'm interested in community organizing and political activism because I'm like enrolled in this course. A fun fact about me, I don't know if you guys know who Tyler the Creator is, but I met him the other week and I like cried for a solid 20 minutes because he's like my idol. So yeah, that's like a fun fact about me. Shane, if you want to take it away.
Hey guys, how you doing? I'm Shane. It's nice to meet you all. Thank you all for coming. Just a little bit about me. Same thing. I'm also a second year undergrad student. I'm also in CESC 50. I'm a political science major with a focus on American politics and a public affairs minor. So I'm really, actively concerned with policy and government and trying to, work towards some sort of systemic change in this country, whether that be issues related to mass incarceration or otherwise. And I haven't been lucky enough yet to meet Tyler the Creator. I have a Flower Boy shirt hanging in there, but maybe one day. But you'll hear from me in the second half. Thank you.
Awesome. Cool. All right, cool. So just before we get started, I just wanted to like be very transparent about like our approach to the presentation. So we really wanted to avoid like lecturing and preaching to you guys. Like this isn't that sort of presentation. Like we know you all are very like skilled and like just smart people. So like we didn't want to just lecture you about like what democracy is and like how to vote and like those like very basic things. We really wanted to center our presentation around like tools and resources. So like it's very sustainable for the long term. And you can sort of just like take these tools and then, like adopt them to however they fit your lifestyle or like your political beliefs. But at the same time, like if you do have like questions about like the like election process or like what representatives like just like very basic questions, that's totally cool too, because I know like we all have like different like levels of like understanding about like the political process. So that's totally cool too. And also like if you find that you like want more information about like what a democracy is or like how the voting process works, I can totally like drop my email in the chat, and like that's totally cool too. I could provide resources for that too. But yeah, we just wanted to like make sure that we were centering like tools and resources for you guys. Cool. So yeah, so just to start off, I'm going to be going over how to understand like representatives' roles, how to like research and things like that. So I thought it would be very useful to go over like the types of elections that we usually have like in California. So I know like even me personally, like it's very difficult to understand like to contextualize certain like elections and like people who are running for election. Like usually I just get like ads for people who are running and I'm like, I have no idea what this is for or like who you are, but okay. So I thought that it would be helpful to like structure it around like what types of elections we have in California. So just at the very like local level, we have city elections versus county versus state. So for example, I'm from San Diego, so we have like elections for like the city of San Diego and then like the county of San Diego and then like California. And then some like important representative positions include like the mayor, city council, the district attorney, county executive. So those are just like some examples of like representatives that could possibly be in like your local elections. But yeah, I linked like a bunch of resources for you guys to like see like sort of more different positions that are applicable to sort of like local elections. So like mayoral elections would be like a good example of like a city election. There's like links for like the local election office where you can like look at upcoming elections. There's a super useful link about election dates and deadlines, which I'm actually going to click on and we can see. Can you guys still see that okay? Or okay, great. So yeah, so this is just how we're gonna you can use this to look at like upcoming election dates and deadlines, which is super helpful. So like I think most of us are in California. I know IJ is in California. But so you just enter California, and then IJ mostly focuses on like state level elections, so like state legislatures. So we can just do that. So federal and state level elections, continue. And then it like gives you upcoming elections. So right now there's only one in June of 2022, which is pretty far away. But it also gives you like voter registration deadlines and like absentee ballot return deadlines and like if early voting is available, which is always helpful because I know like there's just so many like different deadlines and it can get like so confusing. But it could be really helpful for you guys to like maybe just like write it down like from time to time, just so you know like when you start like getting ads for like campaigns and things like that, you can sort of like contextualize it with like your planner or calendar or whatever, you know what I mean? So like you can sort of like identify what the elections are that are going on, which is super helpful. And then it's also important to sort of know who your state rep is, because like depending on where you live, your state rep is going to be different. So for example, I'm like from San Diego, so my state rep in San Diego is different from the one that I have in like Los Angeles, for example. So if we click on that link, it takes you to a website where you can like enter your street address, which is really nice, and figure out who your representative is. So when I just went ahead and took the address for like Initiate Justice, just so we have like some center point to use. Let me go ahead and copy this address. Los Angeles, and then I think it's 1715. Okay. So if you enter that address, it'll come up with the like state assembly member, which is Miguel Santiago, and then the state senator, which is, I don't know how to say her last name, but Sydney Kamlager. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Kamlager.
Okay, cool. So yeah, those are going to be your representatives, which is like super helpful. Just so you like know who is representing you in Congress. And then if you even like click on their link, it like goes to their website, which is super helpful. Has like all their information, which is great. Okay, and then let me just go back to the present mode. Okay, cool. And then again, like I found that IJ actually has like a video on how to find your California state rep. So if like you ever like forget how to use it, you can always like click on that video, which is super helpful. So yeah. And then next, on sort of like a larger level, we also have like congressional and midterm elections. So this is for like in Congress, we have like a Senate and then like a House of Representatives. So we have like elections for senators and then like for Congress people as well. I linked like similar resources on how to like find your representative and how to find your senator. But just something important to note, like if we're talking like in the context of like Initiate Justice, their work is mostly focused in like the California legislature. So like these are still like really important things to know, but when we're talking about like bills that Initiate Justice is like working on or like advocacy, it's mostly in the context of like the California legislature, which is what I like just went over in the previous slide. So yeah. And then, so I know that was a lot of information. Does anyone have any questions so far before we move to like, the next section? No questions? Cool. Awesome. Okay, cool. So then moving on to tools for researching legislatures and candidates. I know that this can be like very overwhelming. So I thought that it would be great to include. So now that like you sort of know like, okay, well, I sort of have a like basic understanding of like what elections will be going on and like what candidates I should look out for, it's still important to know like how do I research the candidates that like I see like ads for on the TV, you know, like how do I like even approach that, because it can be super overwhelming. So I've just included some strategies that can make the research like much less daunting. So let's see. So one way that we can approach like researching candidates is an issue-based approach. So I think this is really important, just because like political parties can be helpful, but they're not always super reliable if you like you are very like one issue centered, or like a certain issue is very like important to you, which I think it is for like a lot of us. And like, for example, someone could like identify as a Democrat and like say that they're like pro defunding the police, and then like support like a bill that like increases funding for the police, you know what I mean? So it's really important. I think if you are like very issue based, I think this is a very like approachable way to figure out who to vote for. So really considering like what issues are most important to you, like what are your deal breakers? So like, for example, my first time voting was actually in the 2020 election, and like obviously you guys probably remember, but like the Black Lives Matter protests like really hit a peak in that summer. And I remember like all the activists that I was following were like, you should like vote, like you should use the power of the vote to like really like advocate for things that Black Lives Matter like really like promotes, I guess. So that was like one of my deal breakers for the election. Like I remember I like every candidate I would look for, I would say like, okay, what are their policies on like police abolition or like prison abolition, and like are they increasing funding for the police, like what sort of like how do the Black Lives Matter movement like rate the candidate, you know? So, and if like they didn't support that, that was like one of my deal breakers. Like I couldn't vote for them. And it was really helpful because generally like people sort of like, you know, like follow similar issues. So if they don't support like defunding the police, they're likely not going to support like other issues that I also support, you know? So it's very helpful. And sometimes like we also can be like very passionate about a lot of different things, but not necessarily like know what category that falls into. So I've listed some common like hot topics that a lot of like politicians talk about, because like when the election cycle goes on, it tends to like there tends to be like main issues that candidates focus on. So I've listed a link here that Congress lists like a bunch of different policy areas and descriptions. And this is super useful in terms of like terminology. So like maybe you're interested in like I said, like prison abolition, but you're not really sure like what to research exactly, because if you search like Joe Biden prison abolition, it's very like a specific search. So you may not get like a bunch of information that could be super useful for you, especially in like mainstream outlets. So for example, if I just do like Control F and search like prison, I can see that like, okay, so like imprisonment, law enforcement, that all falls under crime and law enforcement, that sort of label. And so then you can like take this label and like research it, even like on this website, and see different bills. But also like usually candidates use the same terminology, if that makes sense. So when you like look at their website and you see like crime or like law enforcement, you know, okay, that's going to relate to like prison abolition. That's like, that relates to like my main issue that I am like passionate about, you know? So I hope that makes sense, but that can just be very useful. So cool. And then in terms of like other outside resources that you can use in order to research candidates, there's like a bunch of useful links. I've listed a bunch here. So couragescore.org is a great website that I found recently, and it gives like report cards for representatives. So sort of like as you would like a student in like an elementary school, they give like report cards for like the ACLU, like Planned Parenthood, to see like how they align with like their mission, I guess. And it's super useful, especially for these like issues that we're talking about. And then congress.gov is a great way for like, if they're an incumbent in Congress, you can look up like their voting record. Factcheck.org has a list of candidates' statements and claims that you can like follow. And then vote411.org, that website like shows issues that are specific to like your local ballot. And then you can also like compare candidates, look at upcoming elections, govtrack.com. You can like look up your representatives' voting records. And then like on the issues.org and ballotready.org, both show like what issues are on your ballot and where politicians stand on issues. And then ballotpedia.org is a great one. It shows like the voting records of candidates and different ballot measures. So yeah, and I don't want to like go into all of this because that would be a lot, but the two main ones that I found that were very like approachable were couragescore.org. So if we click on that, we can go ahead. So we found earlier that our representative, at least for Los Angeles, is Miguel Santiago, right? So if we go ahead and go to all representatives, we can go down and search Miguel. This is in alphabetical order, hopefully. Yes, okay. So here's Miguel Santiago. So this is like his report card for college score or courage score, sorry. So he has an A+. Take that with what you will, because this website obviously has a certain ranking system that's very like left-leaning. So like if you are like pretty far left, then that could be a good indicator. But just keep in mind that's kind of partisan. But they also have like lists of like what they voted on, like whether they supported it or didn't. So for example, like we see here that if you guys see this highlight, so the bill that would allow a person on parole to pre-register to vote, register to vote, and vote, he supported it, which is great. That like aligns with IJ's mission a lot. So that's like good. And then if you scroll down, you can see the scorecard grades for like a bunch of partners that they have. So for example, the ACLU might be a good one to compare because they focus on like civil rights issues. He got an 88, which like is okay, not great, kind of disappointing. But like for Planned Parenthood, for example, he has a 100. So, you know, if like you're really passionate about the environment, you can look at the Sierra Club. So this is just a great way to like look at like the issues that I was talking about, right? So for example, I'm very passionate about like reproductive health. So Planned Parenthood is going to be a really important one for me. Like if someone has a bad score for that, I probably won't vote for them. So it's really useful to look at their like grades. Whoops. And then Ballotpedia is very similar. It's just sort of, Ballotpedia is more like nonpartisan, if that makes sense. Like they're very much third party, just sort of like tell you what they voted for, who has supported them. So if we search again, like Miguel Santiago, it has like his profile, what committees he's been a part of, what legislation he's sponsored. So you can like look at here and click at like all the links. You can even see like a history of the elections that he's been a part of and like how he's done. And then let's see if you scroll down, you can see like his endorsements. So for example, if like a candidate is supported by like the police department, that may be a red flag for people who are like pro police abolition. You can look at their donors, so who's like giving them money. And then also the scorecards are really important for like what I was saying with the issue-based approach. And yeah, so this Ballotpedia is really great because it links the actual scorecard. So for example, if you look at his scorecard for Planned Parenthood, it lists like the actual like information on like how they rank people and like what it means really. So that's great. It's all like super accessible. So that's a great one as well. Let's see. All right, cool. So just to move on. So those are sort of some ways that you can research candidates from like an outside source, if that makes sense, like sort of a third party candidate who's like evaluating what like your candidate has possibly done in like the legislature. But also sometimes like there's like very specific issues that maybe you want to like reach out directly to the candidate and see like what their stance is on it, right? So a great way to get their stance on these specific issues is to like just reach out to them directly, because it may not be accessible on their website. Sometimes it can be, but this is like a great tool. For example, you could like look at their campaign events that are going on, their town halls. You can even like call or email their campaign office. They usually respond, which is great. And if not, you can just like be pushy and send them a bunch of emails. One thing I would say though is to be like sort of cautious of like bias in this stance. So for example, like Ballotpedia is very like nonpartisan. So they just like list information and then you can like take that information as you will. But when you ask like a candidate, for example, like if you say, okay, well, what is your stance on like police abolition? They may like not they may like sort of want to pander to you and like sort of be like, oh yeah, like I support that, like, oh, it's okay, but like their stance like may be different based on like their voting record. So it is important to sort of like fact check them, but also like if you just really want their answer to a very specific question, like this is a really great way on how to do that. And then I linked a website on how to like contact your local representative. So there's a bunch of information here, but you can also just search like Miguel Santiago. If you search him, his like official website will come up. So you can go ahead and click that. It's very slow. Okay, so if you go to his like contact me page, let's see, he has this little like form that you can fill out, and like you can select even like an issue, and you can like ask a very direct question to him. So that's like a great way to figure out how you can actually like contact your representative. So yeah, and then before I move on to the last part, are there any questions? I'm not sure if there's been any in the chat, but oh yes, sorry, I can't see the name, but you can go ahead.
Belinda has her hand raised. You can go ahead, Belinda.
Hi, everybody. So I've actually been using that contact option to contact Mr. Santiago, who is my assembly member. I've been doing this since May. I also call, and I have communicated with a rep of his maybe 2 or 3 times via email. But other than that, I really haven't had any communication. And there are other assembly members throughout our state who are extremely communicative. I've had a rep from, I believe, Assembly Member Lee. She emailed me like at 9 p.m. So I'm not sure what determines like how fast their reps respond, answer these inquiries, but they all definitely vary.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. That's a great point. Yeah, totally. I like interned for a council member, and like he would always like complain because I was like his only intern, so like he would like never have time to like answer questions. But also like if you're a big enough rep, you should like carve out the time to like answer representatives. So that's even like something to consider when you're voting. Like if this person isn't like even taking the time to like reach out to you and reply to emails, that could be something that you're like kind of like cautious of the next time like he runs for re-election, you know. But like thank you so much for sharing that, and to say that like you've reached out to him, because that's really interesting. That is very unfortunate though that he doesn't like answer his emails.
I can also add too, I had the opportunity to intern at the state Senate Majority Hertzberg's office a couple years ago, and conversely, yeah, like you said, that was an office that was incredibly well run because they had so many interns to choose from. They had so many people who were working. They were able to stick interns exclusively just on handling constituent information and calls. They had, and also I was able to kind of observe the way that various people up the ladder interact with various requests from constituents, depending on things like how urgent they think the issue is, how relevant the issue is to their platform or things that they like to push forward, just how widely reaching the thing that they're getting information on is. You know, are they receiving a bunch of letters a day on the same concept, or are they receiving, you know, one letter from one person regarding one thing? All of those things kind of contribute, and there's a bunch of different offices, and everyone kind of runs their thing in their own way. But like Chloe said, that's something that you can kind of take into account and to think about when you're trying to make your electoral decisions. Is at the end of the day, you are these people's constituents. They are designed and they are supposed to represent you. And if you feel like they aren't doing that, that's something, of course, to take into account.
Yeah, most definitely, for sure. Yeah, that's a really great point. Does anyone else have like any questions or anything? Any comments? All right, cool. All right, so I thought that with the information we provided, I could give you guys like a little brief example, like a little simulation, I guess. So we can sort of, let's see, hold on, give me a second. So I don't think there's any like huge elections going on right now, but I thought we could just take two candidates and then like use the resources that I've provided to sort of like compare them. So I keep like hyping up couragescore.org. I think it's like really easy to read. I really like it. So if we take this website, so I just thought that I would take like two candidates. So I took Miguel Santiago, who like we keep talking about, and then I'm not sure how you say his name. I think it's Devon Mathis. I apologize to that man if I'm mispronouncing his name. But so if we go ahead and go to all representatives and we go down and we see Miguel Santiago, and if I pull up a new tab, can you guys see that? Like the second window I have? Okay, sick. Cool. And then if we go to Devon Mathis, we go back. So I'm going to duplicate this. So if we use the same website and then we go to all representatives, let's see. All right, so here he is. So let's say that these two people are running against each other, right? For the same spot, and you have to like research and figure out like who to vote for. So if we use like Courage Score, we can see like right off the bat, Miguel has an A+, which again, like take that with a grain of salt because this is the website ranking them and they have like a specific like agenda. But Devon has an F. So right off the bat, that's like something to consider. They're very different, obviously. But even if you don't even look at the grading, you can see that on the bills, they are like, let's see. I hope you can see that, but.
Sorry, real quick, Chloe, you might have to put them both tabs in the same window and then just toggle between them because we are actually only, yeah. So if you toggle
okay, cool.
them, that's probably the best viewpoint for us.
Okay, great. That's what okay, cool. That's what I consider. But so if you guys can see it now, so like Miguel has an A+, and then he has an F. So even if like, since the website's the same, you can compare it really easily, right? So all these bills are listed. He has opposed like pretty much like literally all of them. And then if you go to Miguel, he's supported them. So like you can see that these candidates are like really different right off the bat. And then if you go down, you can see like, for example, the ACLU, he has a score of 11. And then Santiago has an 88, right? So obviously these candidates are very different. So even if you just take like 5 minutes to compare these two, you can tell like who will probably like align with your interests more. So for example, I keep bringing up like Planned Parenthood. He has a score of 0 on Planned Parenthood and Miguel has like a 100. So that's like something really easy that I can see. So Miguel probably like aligns with my interests a lot more. And using the same website and sort of earlier I had two windows side by side, you guys can see it, but that's also like super like a great way to compare the two. You can do the same thing with like Ballotpedia. But like this website I've just found to be like super like easy to read and like fun to look at. But yeah, so like in this case, I would probably vote for Miguel, but that's just one way that you can like go over candidates and compare them by using the same website. And then you can also like just bolster that with like other websites that like fact check their statements. Because maybe there's something that Miguel has done that we don't see, like maybe there's a certain issue that is a deal breaker for you that he like doesn't support. So it's always important to like go beyond just sort of the basic level, but maybe if like just to start off, that's like a great way to compare candidates. So yeah. And then I know I already asked questions, but before I move on and pass it to Shane, are there any like other questions or comments or anything? Cool. Okay, great. And then
Thank you.
like screen sharing, or should I, do you want to like share your screen? Whatever
Yeah, you can
works.
stop sharing and then I can grab it again.
Okay, cool. Cool.
I thought I had someone unmute. Did someone unmute to ask a question? Or was that an accident? Might have been accident. Shannon, did you have a question or? No, okay, maybe that was an accident. Okay, sorry about that.
All right, here we are. Cool, awesome. So if we are good to continue, then we shall. Hey guys, so kind of one thing I just want to, say again before we get into the nitty gritty here is that the purpose of this presentation is to let you know that you have all the tools available to you to make informed decisions and to make the right decisions and to make sure that, you know what's going on in the world and you know what's going on with policy, because policy at the end of the day, to me, is really important because it represents, our ability to make significant systemic change within our government, within our state, at whatever scale you believe in. There's a lot of rhetoric that is pumped into politics. There's a lot of promises you'll hear, a lot of nice words, but at the end of the day, it's the policy that represents what actually gets done, what actually changes. So if we all want to fight for something to change, which I believe we all do, and that might be a different thing for all of us, whatever that is for you, I think understanding policy is key to creating that sort of systemic change on a state level or a local level or a national level. And another thing I want to reiterate before we get too into the weeds is that we might all be in kind of different levels of familiarity or comfort with this topic, or just kind of expertise in general, and that's okay. We're going to go over a couple different tools today. Leginfo is what we're going to lead with and spend a lot of our time on, but if this seems kind of heady or kind of a lot, do try to keep up with it, but do rest assured that at the end we'll go over some other tools that are a little more accessible, a little more generally educational and informational if you feel like you're kind of in an earlier stage of the process. But again, that's totally cool. We're all here to learn. It's, however learning works for you and whatever gets you there. So all of that, is to introduce Leginfo, or legislative information. This is a tool that provides info on current and past legislation in the state of California. Again, we're focusing on California just because it's a more manageable scope. It's something that we can actually, work towards and make an impact on. And obviously everyone here, I believe everyone here is in or from California. So that's perfect. So yeah, I think the easiest way to do this for me is to just kind of do it with you. If you want, you can try to follow along with me in real time. If that sounds like a lot, don't worry. Again, remember this is recorded. So if you just want to watch me and try to just understand my madness and then maybe circle back again and try to do it yourself, that's cool too. Again, this is all about, things that make sense to you and making things work for you. So do whatever you think is best for that. But to go to Leginfo, it's really easy. If you just Google Leginfo, it will be the first thing that comes up. If you prefer, you can also just type in the URL directly, which is leginfo.legislature.ca.gov. So yeah, just make sure to go there. Make sure to get the legislature in there too, because if you don't, it'll take you to the older version of the site, which is not what we want. But yeah, here we are at the current modern version of Leginfo. So if we are good, I'm just going to continue on here. You start here at the homepage of Leginfo. A couple notes for this page here. You'll see this bill search and this code search. You may want to use these, but you may also prefer to use the bill information tab, which we'll get to in a second. And the reason for that is any search that you do from the homepage will only give you results from the current congressional session. So the way the state legislature works is every 2 years is a new session. And those sessions run somewhat independently of one another because there are certain things that get recycled from session to session. So for example, the bill that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today as the example as I go through Leginfo is AB 45, written by Mark Stone, which was from the previous cycle. But if you just search AB 45 here on the main page, you may think that's what you're getting, but you'll actually get the AB 45 from this term, because again, those numbers get recycled every year, because obviously there's only so many numbers. So I may be looking for AB 45 on what is about copays for medical and dental within county jails and state prisons, but instead I'm looking at something related to industrial hemp. So obviously I know that's not what I'm looking for, but that's just why it's important to note that any search you do from the main page is going to give you results on the current info. A couple other things to know if you are going to search from the main page. If you know your bill number, that's usually the easiest piece of info to search from, both with the abbreviation and the number itself. The abbreviation, there's a bunch of different abbreviations, but the two main ones that you're really going to interact with and probably see most of the time are AB and SB, which is Assembly Bill or Senate Bill. That very simply just indicates where the bill originated from. If it starts in the Assembly, it's AB. If it starts in the Senate, it's SB. So if you know that, obviously that's another piece of information to help you find whatever bill you're looking for. If you know the number, that helps. If you just know the number, you can just search the number. So for example, again, we're looking at the current year, but if I just search 45 and there's industrial hemp, that's what I was looking for, then I know it's AB 45. So if you search for something that can return multiple results, it'll return all of those results. But if you search for something that only pulls up one result, it'll pull that up for you automatically. So again, I know that was a lot. This is just the homepage though. So most of what you're going to be doing is going to be done here through the bill information tab, because this gives us a more nuanced search that allows us to look at a lot more, because this is pretty much all the information that you'll probably be starting with if you're trying to work backwards, if you are trying to find something that you don't already know where it is. Obviously, if you already know, I'm looking for AB 45 from the previous session year, I can do that really quickly, and then it's already there. If I search, it'll be the first thing that pops up. But maybe, you don't remember exactly what the code, what the number is, but you remember keywords, you know what it's about. So you can write something, if you know it's about copays related to county jail, you could search keywords like that and you'll get everything that pops up from those keywords and you can sort through there. If you know the author, if you know where it originated from, all these things are available to you. Again, this is all just to make things easier. So I know it seems like a lot, but a lot of the things I'm going to tell you, there's going to be things that are available in multiple places, info that's available in multiple places. I don't want you to be overwhelmed by that. I want you to acknowledge that as kind of an abundance of resources. So it's all designed to make it easier for you. So if everything looks like a lot and you just kind of want to focus on what you think is going to work, that's what this is, this bill search, bill information tab. If there's anything from this intro that you want to get from it, this is what I would want you to get from it. But in the event that you do need more, it is available to you. The text search, if you want to do kind of a more in-depth search just based on what you know about the bill rather than direct information from the bill. Advanced search has absolutely everything under the sun. I can't imagine any situation where you need to use this, but if you did, you'd be able to find a needle in a haystack with it. So go for that. But yeah, we're about to get into the specific bill analysis, which is the important part of this, which is what I really want to focus on. But before we do that, I just kind of want to skim through the rest of the tabs that are here on Leginfo, just so you know what everything is. Here is all of California law. There's the California Constitution and all of the individual law codes. If that's something that interests you, that's where it is. It's obviously too much to go through together, but it's there for you. Same thing with these publications. I would definitely go through on your own time if this is something that you think that interests you, as well as these other resources. All of these provide information. And if it's on a topic that you care about, go for it. And then lastly, you have the My Subscriptions and the My Favorites tab. You can actually register for an account on Leginfo if you would like, and that enables you to use a couple of different tools, such as save certain pieces of legislation as your favorite. write directly to the authors of bills, keep track of active bills to see how they change in real time, all those things. So if you do end up using Leginfo as a regular tool, this is definitely something that you would want to use for that, because it lets you kind of keep track of all your things in the same place. So I will stop there, see if there's anything. I know that's kind of a lot. I know I might talk a little bit fast. So if that's overwhelming, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. And again, this is available for you. This will be recorded, so feel free to refer back to it if you need to. As for looking for how legislators voted on a particular piece of legislation, we will get to that. We will get to all that good stuff, I promise, right now. So yeah, let's stop beating around the bush and get to the good stuff. So like I said, we're going to look at AB 45 as our example that we're going to go through together, just because it is a piece of legislation that Initiate Justice helped work towards passing. And I think it's relevant. It's something that we can use to kind of break all this down. I will also be referencing, and I will duplicate this tab here, AB 256, which is in the current cycle, just because there are some things related to Leginfo that are only relevant to active bills, and there are some things that are only relevant to already chaptered finished bills. So I wanted to have both of those things for you there. But yeah, this is the actual bill page. So as you can see, we're focused on the individual bill. We've already gone through the previous process of finding what we were looking for. This is under the assumption that we've already found it. So there's a ton of information here. There's a lot to go through. And you start here on this text tab. And the text tab can be dense. As you can see, it is the literal raw text of the bill as it is written. As you can see, there's, the codes in here, section code numbers, and it goes item by item. Reading this in its current form is not very helpful. It's not very intuitive. It's written by lawyers for lawyers. So if that's your vibe, if that's your thing, that's awesome. Like if you want to sit here and dig through this and you can get something out of it, that's amazing. I'm just telling you, you probably won't. Or at least it's not the most, effective way to spend your time. That's really what the bill analysis tab is for, which we'll get to. That's what I really want to emphasize. That's the most important part of this presentation to me. But there are still things that you can get from this page that are valuable. First of all, right up here at the top, you have the number of the bill, and you have the title of the bill, what it's related to, and the session it comes from. Up here to the right, you have the ability to save it as a PDF, add it to your favorites if you do have an account, change the version that you're looking at. So it'll always default to the most recent version, but if you want to look at an older version, you can. You'll also have the ability to compare them, which we'll look at in a minute. And then if the bill is active, so we won't see that on the 45, but we'll see that over here on the AB 256, you'll also have the option to track the bill as developments happen in real time. Yeah, so in terms of other pieces of valuable information you can get from the bill text page, I want to direct you over here. You'll see this separate line here after kind of the intro before we get into the actual code itself. This line gives you 4 pieces of valuable information right away, immediately just from loading into the page. 1, vote. That'll tell you the vote type. There's 2 different types of votes in California legislature. You have simple majority votes and you have 2/3 votes. 2/3 votes are required for important changes, things like changes to the California Constitution, bills that have urgency measures related to them in terms of they need to be passed quickly or time is of the essence, or anything that appropriates money significantly. Those will all have 2/3 votes. Everything else will be a simple majority. So just from looking here, we can see that this is a simple majority. So we know there's nothing to do with California Constitution. Has nothing to do with, it's not an urgency measure, and its appropriation isn't significant. Second of all, we have the appropriation box here. This will very simply tell us, is there already money set aside for this bill? Is there money already appropriated for the sake of this bill? If it says yes, that means there is. If it says no, that means there's not. So right here, we can see that there's nothing set aside from this in advance. That ties into the next thing right here, which is fiscal committee. This will very simply tell you, is this bill going to cost money? And if it does cost money, it's going to have to go through the appropriate committees, the appropriations committees, to determine if it's worth the spending, and if so, how much money it's going to get. So we see here, yes, to fiscal committee. That means that this bill did have to pass through the appropriations committee in both the House and the Assembly, which it did. And then finally, local program. This will, that one's pretty self-explanatory. It'll tell you if it refers only to a specific locale in the state or if it applies to the state as a whole. So again, the takeaway for the text page is it's here if you want it, it's where you default, but I don't think you're going to get a ton of valuable information trying to sit here and read it directly. That valuable information will come from bill analysis, which we'll get to in a minute. I had someone ask about votes, and as you can see, there is as in-depth a breakdown as possible of the votes. This will show you in the votes tab every single vote the bill has had to go through, every hurdle it's had to jump through to get to where it is, listed from most recent to oldest. So as you can see, just looking here, we know when it happened, we know what happened, we know what committee was voting on it, we know the exact total of the votes. NVR refers to, I think, non-voting representative, which is they weren't there or they abstained. The motion, and then it'll also tell you specifically who voted what, which I think was the question earlier. So if you're looking for a specific piece of legislation, you can see not only who voted for it within their individual committee, if their committee did get to see it, if it did come to their committee, but also the vote from the Assembly floor as a whole or from the Senate floor as a whole. This is obviously super valuable. We looked at a couple different things, a couple different resources from Chloe that can show you voting history for your representatives, but like we said, if there's a specific issue that you care about, that you really focus on, and you want to see if the people that are supposed to be representing you are representing you in the way that you want, this is a great way to see it. You can get all the vote history, and it's also a great way to understand how popular a piece of legislation is, how contentious it is, how partisan it is. All of those things can be observed just from looking at the votes. History, this is a very in-depth version of literally every hoop you have to jump through to get a piece of legislation passed. This, I hope, if anything else, just shows you how hard it is to get anything done in the legislative system, just because there's so many hoops to jump through, there's so many hurdles, and at any one of these points you can get caught on something and wash away. As you can see, it was a 10-month process from beginning to end for AB 45. So there's a lot of things that happen, and there's a lot of different steps, and the history will give you each and every one of those steps in order. This can also help you understand the legislative process, which if you feel like you're in an earlier part of that knowledge, we'll get to that in one of the later tools as well. But that is history. I do want to look over here at the questions. We have a question from Mary. Why do some representatives abstain from voting? Is it because they don't have enough information? What possibilities are there? Well, it can be a couple different things. First of all, a representative can choose to abstain from voting because they don't want to publicly go against something. Maybe voting against something is too strong of a move for them in terms of balancing, their political agenda, not wanting to upset certain people. So it often is actually a very strategic thing. Sometimes it's literally people aren't there. Sometimes people literally choose not to vote. But oftentimes, I would say more often than not, it is a strategic move. Because when you're a politician, you not only do you want to focus on actually getting things done, you care a lot about how you're represented, how other people see you, and how other people can kind of run with what you say. Because, for example, let's say you do vote for something that you weren't even really that strong on to begin with. Mostly political really is and that is the sad truth for a lot of these things. A lot of these questions you'll ask and you'll find out, oh, that's the answer. Oh, it's just for themselves. Cool. That's the way it goes. It sucks, but it's reality. And that's again, that's why we're all here, right? That's the exact kind of thing that we want to work towards changing, work towards, pushing out, is the people who we select to represent us should be trying to represent us and should be doing what we want them to do and be working towards making the world better, not necessarily towards improving their own careers. Sorry, I didn't mean to get preachy or anything, but it's kind of my whole reason for being. We'll move on to the bill analysis here because I've been blowing it up the whole time. This is, if you've checked out at all, come back to me here. Come back to me just for these next 5 minutes because this is the most important thing that I will tell you. The bill analysis is super important because this will help you actually understand what is being said in the bill in plain English, in normal somewhat colloquial speak, at least in a much more approachable way compared to the raw text itself. So yeah, again, if you haven't been paying attention, please pay attention to this because this is the good stuff. As you can see, this is a fully completed bill. So we have all of the bill analyses. There will be a bill analysis written by every single committee that has to look at a bill. And those analyses will be written from the perspective of the committee that looked at the bill. So for example, you'll see here, Assembly Public Safety. This is the Assembly's Public Safety Committee. Something like AB 45, which is related to incarceration, is considered a public safety issue. So it will first be passed to the Public Safety Committee. And if you read this bill analysis, it will analyze AB 45 from a public safety perspective. Same thing here with appropriations. It will analyze it from a financial perspective, from a budget perspective. So if you are looking for specific things related to the committees and their analysis of that issue, that's there for you, that's cool. In general, you'll probably get the most value out of the floor analyses, whether it be the Senate analysis or the Assembly floor analysis. They're written in different styles, which is just kind of how they tend to do things. So it might be good to check a couple different options if you're looking for something in particular. For example, if I look at the Assembly floor analysis, I'll open them both, we'll look at them both. I'll probably spend most of my time going through the Senate floor analysis, but we will look at them both. If I look at the Assembly analysis, for example, you'll see that it is broken up into a specific argument in support, an argument in opposition that comes from the people who argue it. If you look at the Senate, though, it won't have those direct arguments, but it will have a long list at the end, which I'll also touch on, listing everybody who is opposition or everyone who is in favor. But yeah, in terms of the bill analysis tab itself, all of these are valuable. Pick the one that's most relevant to what you're trying to learn about the bill, and then we'll go from there. So we'll look at the Senate floor analysis for AB 45, kind of run down through it to show you all of the information that's available in this document, because again, this is the big one. This has all the information you need. So you'll see here at the top, we have the bill number again, we have the authors, we have previous votes. The Assembly floor is a big vote, so that's stuck all the way at the very bottom. But again, all of those pieces of information you've already seen in other places. You've already seen in the vote history tab, for example. These things are popping up multiple times in multiple places. That's not meant to be daunting. That's just meant to help you figure out what works for you. So if you know you're always going to look at the bill analysis, and you know this is always going to be at the top of the Senate floor analysis, you don't even need to bother looking at the vote history tab, because you know the vote history is going to be on the Senate floor analysis, for example. But let's get into all of the information that you can actually get from this, because there's a ton. Aside from that, if you scroll down here, you'll see the subject. And again, maybe I didn't do a good enough job of explaining what AB 45 is literally for those of you who aren't familiar with it, but I think that might be a good thing, because that to me shows exactly the value of the subject and the digest that we have written here. So the subject is, very quickly, pop, pop, pop. What is this bill? What does it cover? It covers inmates, covers medical care, and it covers fees. So if I said to you, hey, what is AB 45? You look at the subject, you can immediately tell me it has something to do with inmates and the fees that they pay for their medical care. The digest will give you a little bit more of an in-depth version of that. This will tell you exactly what AB 45 is meant to do. This bill prohibits the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation and city and county jails from charging inmates a copay for medical visits and prohibits those entities from charging a fee for durable medical equipment or medical supplies provided to an inmate as medically necessary. So whereas the subject will tell you who it's about, inmates, what it's about, fees for medical care, the digest will give you, in a very short, readable version, what is AB 45 trying to do specifically. So it identifies the prohibition of the CDCR to charge their copays for medical visits for inmates. So yeah, that immediately tells you, two levels of information. And then if you want the third level of information, you have that in the analysis here. So again, like I said, different groups do their analyses different. So the way this Senate one is written, it will give you a full description step by step of the existing law, how things are now, as well as referencing the codes that those things come from, and then immediately follow that with this bill and indicate all of the things that this bill changes. So you can compare those things directly. You can look at what it is now and what this bill does and how those things shift. This is incredible info. So again, if you were really into AB 45 and you did really want to get into the weeds on this, you can see all the penal codes that reference all the current laws, and then you can see very specifically how this bill attempts to change those things. Because again, why are we looking at policy to begin with? Because we want to work towards significant systemic change. So it's important to examine, once we're actually looking at the policy and looking at the bills, okay, what systemic change is this actually doing? So for example, we can see, looking at the bill as it already exists, looking at the law as it already existed, that inmates couldn't be turned away if they didn't have any money in their personal accounts. So that's not necessarily something that changes with the bill.
All right, real quick, and
yeah.
I don't want to interrupt the entire thing, but real quick, if we can use people who are incarcerated over.
Oh yes, my mistake. I apologize.
No problem, no problem. Just as we continue to talk about it, thank you.
Yes, I understand. Thank you. For people who are incarcerated, yes, sorry, and I apologize if I did offend anybody or trigger anybody or anything like that. It's not something that I'm trying to do. I'm also previously impacted, for what it's worth. Not that it really matters, but I do think it's something to keep in mind. So I apologize for that. But just to continue on, you also have in the analysis document, you have the background. This can get a little heady. It can get a little very involved and hard to read. But this offers, the legal justification for what the law is attempting to do. So for example, it'll indicate that Estelle versus Gamble in 1976 lays out the obligation for the government to provide medical care for people who it punishes by incarceration. So that, again, that's all relevant information that's important, because all of these things are rooted within constitutional law or law in some aspect. And that's all available for you here. It lays out important information related to the language of the bill itself. So for example, medical equipment and supplies, because it defines these things because it defines supplies in different contexts, it has to provide those definitions and make very clear, lay out every specific use case for those terms, so that obviously once the bill is actually into effect and becomes a law, there are no holes in it. There's nothing that can slip through. We come down here to the fiscal effect box. This will give you a very short version of the Appropriations Committee's look at things. Again, we see some of these information, some of these pieces that we saw on the bill page, on the main text page. They're here for you too if you prefer them here. It's all about however it works best for you. And then here, this last part at the very bottom, this to me is the most important thing that you'll find in the floor analysis. It will show you a complete list of those verified organizations who have publicly listed themselves in support of a piece of legislation, and the full list of places that have publicly listed themselves, of organizations that have publicly listed themselves in opposition for a piece of legislation. So in the case of AB 45, for example, keeping in mind what the bill is supposed to work towards, if you think about that, and then you scroll through this long list of all these organizations who have publicly announced their support for this bill, and this is a giant list. If you see organizations in here that you're familiar with, that you support, that you like, that you feel do what you want, what you think needs to be done in the world, this can be a very valuable tool to indicate, oh, okay, so this is maybe a bill that I want to support if all these people who I believe in, or who I agree with, or who tend to do work that I like, are in support of it. And additionally, which you'll see once I get down to the opposition, that can work just as significantly in the reverse. So if I just scrolled through 3 pages worth of approvals and people in support of something, and then you get down to the opposition and that's all you see, that kind of speaks for itself, right? That would tell me everything I would need to know about a piece of legislation, and I imagine it would tell you too. So again, all of this bill analysis document, and there are a bunch of different kinds of these documents as we referred back to, depending on the committee that you're being referred to or that you're coming from. They all provide different forms of similar information, but within the bill analysis doc for whatever bill that you're looking at, you will be able to get all of the incredibly valuable information that that really enables you to kind of open up and examine what this bill is about. If it's something that you want to support, if it's something that you think got the support that it needed, if you're looking at things from backwards. But yeah, and the bill analyses, again, if there's anything you take away from it, look at these. They will, again, we'll refer back to the Assembly Bill one just to give you an example of how they can shift and how they can be different. So instead of just giving you the full list of everyone in opposition, here's an actual argument directly from the Riverside Sheriff's Association, if that's something that interests you. It'll also have a direct argument from the ACLU in support of it. So using these tools in congruence with one another, using multiple tools together to cross-reference what you're looking for to get as much information as possible, it's all good, because again, like what we want to emphasize at the end of the day, your goal should be to learn as much as possible and to try to make informed decisions, and that's what really matters. We will go back to, if there aren't any questions on bill analysis, and again, the easiest way to do this, if this is something that interests you, would be to just go back on your own time, pick a bill that really interests you, and to look at that page directly. And to dig through the bill analysis the way that I just did, in a more in-depth way, that helps you get the information that you feel you need. We also have these 2 tabs here. Ooh, I just got a spinning circle, that's not good. We have the Today's Law as Amended tab and the Compare Versions tab. These both do very similar things. You'll see this kind of red strike through blue text effect on both tabs. What that does is it lets you directly compare 2 different versions of the bill to see how they've changed with time. So for example, what I just did here is I'm comparing the current version that did get chaptered, that's actually law, to the version that was initially introduced when the bill was first printed. The blue will show you everything that's new that was added since then. The red will show you everything that's struck since then. So obviously in this example, we only started with this, and a lot changed in this bill over time. Obviously this is a 10-month process, but this lets you compare directly to see what's changed over time, what's been added, what's been removed. because again, because these bills because it's such a long process, a lot can change. So there may be things that you were really passionate about at the start of a bill, but as it's been kind of worked through and gone through so many people, certain aspects of that have kind of shifted away. It's all important things to know. We have the status tab here. The status tab, and I will refer back to 256 here because I think it's important to kind of juxtapose how it's different for a completed piece of legislation versus something that's still active. So, sorry, what you'll see here, if we look at the bill status for AB 45, AB 45 is done. So this top bar here is like, it's like a loading bar. It's like progress. So AB 45 got chaptered. It loaded all the way through. But that will stop based on wherever in the process that bill is. So for example, if we look at 256, which currently is kind of stuck in the Senate committee, in the Appropriations Committee, I believe, which we can see down here from the last history actions. This shows us that there's still work to do, that we are stuck in this committee. There's a couple more votes for this bill to become a law, to become chaptered. A couple other things we can see from status, we can see the measure, we can see all the authors. We've seen these in other places, but if this is a place where it makes more sense to you, that's great. It'll tell you the most recent votes. It'll tell you the type of measure info is really cool. A lot of this, again, we've seen in other places, but it's all here in one place if that appeals to you or if that makes more sense to you. But yeah, that's the status tab. And then the last tab we have here on Leginfo is comments to author. You will only be able to access this if you do have an account, but it's pretty self-explanatory. It enables you to write directly to the author of the bill if that is something that you would like to do. But yeah, that is the bulk of Leginfo, of the Leginfo aspect of this presentation. I know it was a lot of information. And again, I want to emphasize the value of this being recorded, because if it did go too fast, or if there is something that you kind of want to walk through again on your own time, it'll be here for you. So I definitely recommend doing that. There's also, and I will get to that now that we're going to switch over to some of the other resources that I've wanted to make you guys aware of. There is a video on the Initiate Justice YouTube channel that explains Leginfo in a pretty concise way. So that's available to you too. But I just wanted to go through some of these tools together just to kind of show them off. We won't talk about Find Your Rep or Ballotpedia too much because Chloe already touched on those, but we will talk about the others. First off, right here is the learning museums from the Capitol Museum, learning resources from the Capitol Museum, sorry. I emphasized a lot during this presentation that we may be all at different levels, and that's totally okay. If you do feel that Leginfo is kind of a couple steps too advanced for you, or you're not quite there yet, and that's something you want to work up towards, and you still kind of want to establish a more baseline set of information, more baseline knowledge related to how state government works, this Capitol Museum site is incredibly valuable. I linked directly to the life cycle of a bill page because as you can see here, you can click on, there's an ebook, which gives you like I think it's a pretty long doc that gives you a full breakdown of the life cycle of a bill and how this works. 37 pages, yeah, so it's as in-depth as you want it to be. It has this cool little flow chart, which we'll see in a couple different places, but this website, specifically if you go up here to the Learn About the Government tab, again, if we're all in different places, that's totally fine. If you feel like you're a little bit earlier in the process, this is definitely a resource I would recommend because it teaches you super basic information and allows you to kind of build on that with the more nuanced information that we touched on earlier with Leginfo and some of the other things we're going to talk about. So yeah, branches of government, Assembly and Senate, more specific ones, they're all here for you, which I would definitely recommend to go through, especially if there's a lot of things that I've said in this that feel kind of foreign or not familiar. The Initiate Justice YouTube channel, gotta get the plug in. is also an amazing resource. There are a ton of videos on this channel that I definitely used in preparation for this presentation that I would recommend. You also have, every monthly member meeting here. If you miss any of them, the whole podcast is here. But in terms of the quick kind of useful resources, you have this 6-minute video I mentioned on how to use Leginfo, which I would definitely recommend. And you have these short videos on how a bill becomes a law in the legislative process. This video is great. And then also a simple video just helping you find your representatives. And these videos are also available in Spanish if that so appeals to you. But yeah, definitely check out the YouTube channel. Like Antoinette mentioned, the recording of this will also be on this YouTube channel too. So I've referred to that in a couple places. This is where you're going to want to go. It's very simple, youtube.com/initiate justice, or you can just search initiate justice YouTube and it'll come up. So that's great. I would definitely refer to that. Couple other things that I wanted to go through. Sorry, screen sharing makes everything kind of slower. This is the legislation tracking sheet, which I would highly, highly recommend. This was put together by Crispy or Christine, who is a part of the Initiate Justice family. And she has done unbelievable work on putting this doc together. It might take a minute to load because there's so many tabs and there's so much here. But this is pretty much every bill in the current session related to initiate justice centric topics, and a lot of other, you can sort by the category here. Everything is here. Everything that is vaguely associated, any piece of legislation that covers an issue that you might be passionate about, or that a loved one on the inside that you're trying to work with, wants changed or thinks there needs to be work towards, you'll find every one of those pieces of legislation here, on top of, insane amounts of information. You have really in-depth descriptions, you have all the authors, you have a ton of things. And then also down here, I want to emphasize that this isn't just the only tab. You have all of these different tabs that are all just as in-depth as the first. So if Indigenous land is something that's very important to you, that's here. Breakdowns on committee members and assembly members and votes and district attorneys, which is an incredibly important part of the process that occasionally gets glossed over. I will link this doc in the chat. The whole presentation will be available to you. But that is the doc just for the spreadsheet, and that shouldn't give you any problems, but would definitely recommend that. There's so much here to go through. Lastly, we talked about Find Your Rep already. We talked about Ballotpedia already. But I did want to mention this guide on writing to your representative. This was written by the American Psychological Organization, who are, if you've ever had to write a paper in APA format, these are the people to thank for that. But this is a good guide on writing to your congressperson. There is, a lot of people, the idea of writing to your congressperson in the traditional way may not be as, romanticized as it once was, but I still think it's very important. I still think it's kind of a lifeline to our democratic process. So if there is something that you're passionate about, I do encourage you to write to your local representative. And this is a good way of just kind of understanding how to write something that's effective and efficient and concise and specific, all of these things. It's just a really good guide to base your letter on. I know a lot of organizations these days, if they're pushing for a particular piece of legislation, will also put out draft letters, in which case you only just insert your name and then you send the letter out that way. I know those are popular. So the traditional, sense of writing a letter to your government official may not, exist as strongly as it once did, but it's still something that I believe in. It's still something that I hope you care about and are willing to do. But yeah, that is pretty much all of the tools that I wanted to go over. Again, I would emphasize the Capitol Museum resources if you're newer in the process, if this is something that you're trying to get into and understanding the government more and understanding how state government works more. That's definitely where I would go. The Initiate Justice YouTube channel is great. That legislation tracking sheet, you will find plenty of time. Like you can spend plenty of time digging through that just because there's so much available to you there. But yeah, again, as I kind of wrap things up here and I open up space for any additional questions if you do have them, I just kind of wanted to emphasize the importance of, caring and just wanting to inform yourself and to learn as much as you possibly can about the issues that you care about, to try to get things right, because at the end of the day, that's what we're all working towards. We want to live in a world that is just and fair and treats everybody the way they're supposed to be treated. And hopefully one day through policy, we can all work together and we can all unite together and push towards, reforms that will actually change the world for the better. But for now, we'll keep chipping away as we can. And hopefully Leginfo or some of these other tools that we've looked at will help you do that. So thank you very much for listening to me drone on. I hope I didn't go on too long, but I hope you learned something. I hope that you took away something that might be useful to you. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Shane. And like Shane mentioned, if there are any questions, it is a lot of information and it's very intricate and it's hard to actually process, right, in just an hour and a half. So we understand that, but if there are any questions, I see some hands going up. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Farmars for your question.
Hi, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Chloe, Shane, thank you so much for your presentation. It was great. I'm one of Ground Game LA's texting coordinators. We texted action alerts on nearly a dozen pieces of legislation on decarceration this year. And we're thinking of setting up a web page that lists the way legislators voted on the bills that had close votes, similar to what Kurd Score did, but with a lot more on decarceration. So my question to everyone here is, would this be of interest to you all? And would any of you be interested in helping us put this together?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for those who heard or may not have heard the question, it's basically putting together, they're working to put together a platform or a website that compares the votes for those pieces of legislation, specifically in regards to decarceration, where there were close votes, and really just breaking down what that voting pattern looked like for those various pieces of legislation that are related to decarceration and criminal justice reform.
And Farah, if you also wanted to drop your information in the chat, that way folks can reach out to you, but also so that way, I mentioned in the chat earlier, somebody had asked if they were gonna be able to access the links and the information being presented tonight. So we'll send an email to folks who registered for this event with the links for that, but also to include your information as well in case folks want to reach out to you to make sure that folks can have access to that information, even if they weren't able to make it to the actual event tonight. So if you could just drop that information in the chat and we can share it with folks who are interested in this.
Yes, thank you. And while you are also processing, if there are any questions, please put them in the chat or unmute yourself. But I just want to acknowledge, appreciate, and uplift some of the things that Shane did cover and why they're so critical for what we do. So we, as you all know, if you have gone to any Initiate Justice meetings or gatherings, brainstormings, whatever it may be, we reference Leginfo a lot because it is a wealth of knowledge for us to be able to understand a bill and advocate for it. Something that Shane highlighted is the bill analyses and how you have those arguments in support, but also in opposition. And so I know that many of us, we're passionate about these particular issues. And so we know why we support them. We understand and we can explain that from our own experiences. Something that is important when we're considering how we can impact the vote of our representatives, we have to be able to communicate to them, right, what those arguments in support are from the standpoint of the community, from the standpoint of those who are writing the legislation, so that we are on the same, pretty much the same playing field, right? So that additional knowledge, knowing these are the arguments in support, these are the people and the organizations in support, these are the arguments in opposition, these are the people, the only two or the only one, and sometimes none, people or organizations who are opposing it. And this is why they said that allows you to, one, be able to come to the table or come to any discussion with a representative with a full, well-rounded viewpoint on the issue, right? But not only that, it allows you to build up counter arguments. So you can basically break down some of those arguments in opposition that oftentimes aren't extremely relevant or oftentimes aren't even a factor, right, in what we are attempting to achieve. And so I just wanted to highlight that the use of the bill analysis, it is really critical. We highlight it sometimes in the Institute of Impacted Leaders, but for those who have not gone through the Institute, just really acknowledging that many of us at Initiate Justice, we print those, use those, and study those when we're planning to talk about a bill, speak to a representative. So that's extremely critical. So definitely want to encourage you all to do that. And then something else that I also wanted to uplift were those additional resources on our YouTube channel. And those can just be starting points. So this was a very in-depth discussion of Leginfo. Our YouTube video is just a brief introduction to it. We have the brief introduction to the legislative cycle. We have a brief video that says how you can find your representative and how you can contact your representative. And so using those as starting points, but then using some of those additional resources that Shane and Chloe have presented, you can start to just dig a little bit deeper on your own time and at your own pace into some of those issues and really begin to build up your knowledge bank when it comes time to vote. So elections are coming up soon. Many offices are going to be up for, the seats are going to be up, and you're going to be voting on those. And so just beginning to familiarize yourself just a little bit more and a little bit more with these tools, with this information, with this knowledge, one candidate at a time, one rep at a time, or one bill at a time will ultimately allow you to make the most informed decisions as it comes time for voting, because that's coming up for us all. So I just kind of wanted to highlight some of those things and really thank Shane and Chloe for taking the time and presenting this, because it's extremely helpful, especially for those of you here who maybe didn't go to the Institute of Impacted Leaders and haven't been thoroughly introduced to these tools. So thank you, Shane. Thank you, Chloe. Daisy, of course, for behind the scenes, and just want to really express our gratitude for you being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to all of you for coming and for listening. And like I said, I hope that you were able to take something away from this. I hope I wasn't just throwing it at you, right?
Yes, and Chloe, any final thoughts or anything before we just wrap up with some announcements and things of that nature? I don't see any questions in the chat. I don't see any more hands raised.
No, yeah, I said it in the chat, but yeah, I know. Thank you guys. This means like so much. It was so fun putting the presentation together, and like, thank you so much for like just giving us like the space and like for coming. Like it really means so much. So thank you guys.
Thank you. So real quick, I know we have some people who are here maybe for the first time, and we're talking about things like the Institute of Impacted Leaders, our member meetings, and all of these terms, and you're like, what does that mean? What are you all talking about? So just real quick, want to uplift that the Institute of Impacted Leaders, what that is, it's a 12-week training program that Initiate Justice hosts in various regions throughout California to train those of us who are directly impacted by incarceration, how to advocate for systemic change, how to advocate for ourselves and for better legislation that truly centers the experiences of people who are currently or formerly incarcerated and their loved ones. So it's a 12-week course. It's created by people who are directly impacted, exclusively for people who are directly impacted, where we teach things like this. We talk about what the policy process looks like in the state of California so that you fully understand that. We talk about how and at what points in the process you can uplift your voice. And then we also have practical activities to equip you with these tools. So if you are interested in something like that or in that, please definitely fill out our interest form, tinyurl.com/request-a-cohort. And this is where you can let us know that you're interested in an Institute of Impacted Leaders cohort and you want one in your area, and we will connect with you next year as we begin to launch new ones. Also, our member meeting. So every single month, Initiate Justice gets together all of our committee members, many of our committee members, our organizers, staff, as well as other allies and supporters who help us accomplish this work, get together and we talk about what current updates are, what projects we're working on, accomplishments. We oftentimes have a dialogue or a guest speaker focusing on a particular issue of some sort. And so we are having our last and final member meeting for 2021 on Wednesday at 6:30. So please join us. We'll talk about the year in review, accomplishments, and we'll look toward 2022 and all the power that we've built and the additional power that we intend to build next year. So definitely join us. Daisy plugged the link in the chat, but for those who maybe don't have access to the chat, if you go to tinyurl.com/IJ monthly 2021, you can use that link to register for this Zoom meeting that's happening on Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. And then also one more meeting that I would like to uplift tomorrow. Me and Daisy are hosting our outside membership committee meeting. So our outside membership committee is actually what ultimately inspired this particular skill building webinar and the future skill building webinars that are to come. It is where many of our organizers and members who are interested in building our power here on the outside talk about how can we do that? How can we build the power of our existing members, as well as bringing these skills and these tools and bringing in additional new members throughout our community. And so we talk about outreach, we talk about tabling, we talk about building relationships in academia. So with college campuses, with educators, with students, we talk about what tools we can bring to you all in the community to help you advocate on your own and continue to build your own power in your communities. And so that's happening tomorrow at 5:30. Daisy just plugged that link into the chat as well. But again, super, super grateful for Chloe and Shane for putting this together. Initiate Justice has been closed for the past 2 weeks. So this is all Chloe and Shane who have produced this webinar for you all this evening. So thank you. And Daisy, if you have any final thoughts, please, otherwise.
Just that, hoping that the information presented tonight was helpful for folks. Some of you graduated through the Institute, but this may have been a refresher. You learned something new tonight. For those of you who are still learning about policy and so forth, hopefully this was a good introduction to the type of work that we do. And if you are system impacted, we highly encourage you to sign up for the Institute of Impacted Leaders program, because this is where we really kind of put those skills into practice and make sure that you graduate having at least done one visit and knowing how to advocate for yourself. But This is being recorded, so like I said, we are going to be sharing this on our YouTube. There was also a previous webinar a couple of weeks ago that was hosted by our other intern, Ashwin, that had to do more with, what was the topic on that one, Antoinette?
Yeah, it was just using Zoom, setting up your email, how to navigate different Google platforms like Google Docs, like Gmail, like Google Calendar. So just general online communication and virtual communication tools.
Yeah, so that one, if you missed it, it was also recorded. We are going to be posting both of these to YouTube once they get edited. But that one also is really good for folks who maybe are still navigating the tech world or getting familiar with the Gmail and Google platform. So just keep an eye on that. Again, this will all be on our YouTube channel pretty soon. But thank you all for joining us tonight.